and Senate. Governors are appointed for 14-year terms. The Board of Governors oversees and sets policy direction for the system, including 12 Federal Reserve banks located around the country, which take the pulse of the nation's economic health from a regional perspective. The 12 Reserve banks represent.
Ok, ya estamos aquí, estamos en vivo. Ok, ahora entonces,
Supervising and examining commercial banks and other financial
se ve bastante bien.
enforcing compliance with federal
Ok. Vamos a ver el MetaTrader, ok. Estamos aquí.
They and the board also play a key role in another primary Fed function, fostering the safety and efficiency of our nation's payment systems, including distributing currency and coin to banks, operating electronic payment systems, and clearing our checks. In addition, the reserve banks act as the government's bank, providing services such as maintaining the Treasury Department's transaction account and issuing and redeeming U.S. listed securities. They also act as a bank for banks.
Ok, estamos aquí. Esto sigue estando presente. Aquí también. Ok. Quiero ver si cuando hable esta gente, hacia dónde nos vamos a mover.
Foundation of our economy. The third Fed entity is the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, which brings together representatives of the board and the reserve banks to consider the state of the U.S. economy and set a course for our monetary policy in a manner that seeks to promote an economy that works for all Americans. The 12-member FOMC establishes an appropriate position or stance for monetary policy to help move the economy towards two essential mandates set for the Fed by Congress, promoting maximum employment and price stability. This occurs mainly through the FOMC's influence on interest rates and credit conditions, which can significantly impact financial conditions, including economic productivity and even spending and investment decisions by households, communities, and businesses. Working together, these three key Fed entities and the unique Federal Reserve System structure established by Congress more than a century ago help promote conditions resulting in a strong, healthy, and sustainable economy.
Si no me cuentes tu vida, crack.
Across the United States, the Federal Reserve, through its Federal Reserve Education Program, helps people understand how the economy works, so consumers have the tools to make sound financial decisions. Through this education program, teachers have access to classroom-ready online resources for students from kindergarten to college. Videos, classroom lessons, online education, publications, and more. These resources are all free for educators to use in their lesson plans, or as they see fit. Many of the Federal Reserve System's regional reserve banks, located in 12 districts across the nation, also offer in-person and online professional development that allows educators to deepen their knowledge
Quedaron igual, ¿no?
in their craft.
Sí, quedaron igual.
Economics, personal finance, and more.
Ok.
At the board and reserve banks, students also get hands-on opportunities like internships and participation.
Esto sigue subiendo en teoría, ¿no?
Economics concepts and potential careers in economics and finance. Consumers are empowered to make sound financial decisions through the availability of easy-to-understand resources that explain personal finance concepts, the broader economy, and the Federal Reserve's role in it. Federal Reserve education is committed to equipping educators, educating students, and empowering consumers.
Por lo menos aquí arriba quisiera verla.
For more information, visit federalreserveeducation.org to find links to resources and reserve bank programs offered near you.
Este. Ok, hijo de la gran perra. Good afternoon, my friend. El good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. The U.S. economy has been expanding at a solid pace. While job gains have remained low, the unemployment rate has been little changed in recent months. Inflation has moved up and is elevated, in part reflecting the recent increase in global energy prices. Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy rate unchanged. We see the current stance of monetary policy as appropriate to promote progress toward our maximum employment and 2% inflation goals. Developments in the Middle East are contributing to a high level of uncertainty about the economic outlook, and we will remain attentive to risks to both sides of our dual mandate. I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has been expanding at a solid pace. Consumer spending has been resilient, and business fixed investment has continued to expand at a brisk pace. In contrast, activity in the housing sector has remained weak. In the labor market, the unemployment rate was 4.3% in March and has changed little in recent months. Job gains have remained low. A good part of the slowing in the pace of the job growth over the past year reflects a decline in the growth of the labor force due to lower immigration and labor force participation, though labor demand has clearly softened as well. Other indicators, including job openings, layoffs, hiring, and nominal wage growth, generally show little change in recent months. Inflation has moved up recently and is elevated relative to our 2% longer run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 3.5% over the 12 months ending in March, boosted by the significant rise in global oil prices that has resulted from the conflict in the Middle East. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 3.2% over the 12 months ending in March. This relatively high rate largely reflects the effects of tariffs on prices in the goods sector. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have risen this year, likely because of the substantial rise in oil prices. Most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75%. The economic outlook remains highly uncertain, and the conflict in the Middle East has added to this uncertainty. In the near term, higher energy prices will push up overall inflation. Beyond that, the scope and duration of potential effects on the economy remain unclear. as does the future course of the conflict itself. We will continue to monitor the risks to both sides of our dual mandate. We are well positioned to determine the extent and timing of additional adjustments to our policy rate based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Monetary policy is not on a preset course, and we will make our decisions on a meeting-by-meeting basis. This is my last press conference as chair, and I will close with a few thoughts. First, I want to congratulate Kevin Warsh on his advancement out of the Senate Banking Committee this morning. This is an important step forward, and I wish him well as that process continues. The Federal Reserve exists for one fundamental purpose: to foster the economic conditions in which American families and businesses can thrive. Stable prices, a strong job market, and a financial system they can depend on. Every decision we make, whether about interest rates or regulatory and supervisory matters or other issues, is made in service of that purpose. Our decisions reflect the collective judgment of the Board of Governors and the Federal Open Market Committee, colleagues who demonstrate analytical rigor, principled judgment, and a genuine commitment to the public interest. Our collaborative and deliberative process has long reflected a shared commitment to finding common ground in service to our mission. This institution is resilient, capable, and staffed by professionals of extraordinary talent and exceptional dedication. It has been a privilege to serve alongside so many great public servants at the Board of Governors and around the Federal Reserve System. The Fed's work is only as effective as the public's understanding of it, and you, the press, are essential to keeping the public informed about what we do and why. The people we serve benefit from your careful reporting. I welcomed the announcement last Friday by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia that she had closed the criminal investigation. She also noted, however, that she would not hesitate to restart the investigation. Over the weekend, the Department of Justice provided assurances that they will not reopen the investigation unless there's a criminal referral from the Fed's Inspector General. And, absent such a referral, if they do appeal the recent court decision, they would not seek, as part of that appeal, to restart the investigation or send new subpoenas. I've said that I will not leave the board until this investigation is well and truly over with transparency and finality, and I stand by that. I'm encouraged by recent developments, and I'm watching the remaining steps in this process carefully. My decisions on these matters will continue to be guided entirely by what I believe is in the best interest of the institution and the people we serve. After my term as chair ends on May 15, I will continue to serve as a governor for a period of time to be determined. I plan to keep a low profile as a governor. There's only ever one chair of the Federal Reserve Board. When Kevin Warsh is confirmed and sworn in, he will be that chair. Once sworn in as board chair, his new colleagues will elect him to chair the FOMC as well. As I regularly point out from this podium, our success in delivering our goals matters for all Americans. I'm confident that the Fed will continue to do its work with objectivity, integrity, and a deep commitment to serve the American people. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the kind words about the press. Often doesn't come from the podium in different places, but appreciate that. Can you talk about what is gone into your decision to remain on the board? What kind of criteria are you weighing, and how long might you stay? Thank you.
Sure. So, my concern is really about the series of legal attacks on the Fed, which threaten our ability to conduct monetary policy without considering political factors. And I want to note here, this has nothing whatever to do with verbal criticism by elected officials. I've never suggested that such verbal criticism is a problem, and neither has anyone else here. But these legal actions by the administration are unprecedented in our 113-year history, and there are ongoing threats of additional such actions. I worry that these attacks are battering the institution and putting at risk the thing that really matters to the public, which is the ability to conduct monetary policy without taking into consideration political factors. It is so important for our economy, for the people that we serve, that they can depend over time on a central bank that operates that way, free of political influence. It's part of the absolute foundation of this amazing economy that we have. It's just one of the many reasons why the U.S. economy is the envy of the world. That piece of institutional architecture separates successful countries from unsuccessful countries. It is extremely important, not for the people who work at the Fed at any given time, but for the people that we serve, that the Fed remain able to conduct monetary policy in a way that doesn't get pulled into politics, trying to help or hurt any particular politician or political party. It's critical for the people that we serve. In terms of when I would leave, I will leave when I think it's appropriate to do so. Was that all your questions, or was that?
So I just have a follow-up, which is, what would you say to the criticism that by remaining on the board, you're actually taking a political act and denying President Trump the majority of the board, which as president he would have if you left?
I don't see that at all. As I mentioned, I'm literally staying because of the actions that have been taken. I had long planned to be retiring, and the things that have happened in the last 3 months have I think left me no choice but to stay until I see them through at least that long. In addition, I don't see how this will interfere. My intention is not to interfere. I was a governor for almost 6 years, and the tradition is at the Fed that governors who understand how difficult the role of chair is, and as a soon-to-be former chair, I do understand how hard it is to get consensus with 19 strong-minded people. You work with the chair. You try to be heard, but also collaborate with the chair and try to support the chair when you can. When you can't, you can't. And I think that's the attitude that people generally take, and that's the attitude that I'll take.
Nick.
Chair Powell, if I could ask about the inflation outlook. In March, you described the standard practice of looking through energy shocks as conditional on inflation expectations staying anchored. Since that meeting, there has been very little progress reopening key energy trade corridors. Can you help us understand how the inflation outlook has changed in the intermeeting period, beginning with the prospects for tariff pass-through resolving on the timeline that you had outlined in March, before getting to the energy shock that is now on top?
So, I would look at it this way. For a long time, we've been working on the hypothesis, really, that tariffs would lead to a one-time price increase, and that would go away over time. In other words, that there would be no further change. So measured inflation would reflect that higher level going up more and more. And it's time for that to happen. We really do expect that to be happening in the next 2 quarters. So we'll be watching very carefully to see that what we've thought all along would happen. That's the kind of critical part of the forecast. We need to really see that. With energy, it's so hard to say. I mentioned, in sort of the textbook, you would look through an oil shock because they tend to be short-lived and they tend to revert. And monetary policy works with long and variable lags, so you wouldn't necessarily react right away. I think that is all the more true given that we're several years above 2% inflation and that we're already looking through the tariff shock. So I think we're going to be very cautious about that. But the question about looking through energy really is not in front of us right now. It hasn't even peaked yet. And I think we'd want to see the backside of that and progress on tariffs before we even thought about reducing rates.
So if I could follow up, the statement today preserves language that has taken on some meaning as it was socialized when the committee was actively lowering rates. Why is that easing bias still ripe, given how different the inflation outlook is now versus a meeting or two ago? And what more would have to happen for it to get evicted?
So that was, as you will recall, we had a discussion about that at the last meeting. We talked about it in the press conference after the March meeting. We had the same today. We had quite a vigorous discussion about that very issue and the guidance, and is it still appropriate and that kind of thing. And I would say that the number of people on the committee who either could support that language changing to a more neutral stance so that the hike is as likely as a cut. That number has increased over the intermeeting period, and it's easy to see why. I mean, it's a good question, right? You see, inflation has moved up over the interim a bit. Core inflation is 3.2 now, moving, albeit just a little bit, in the wrong direction. And we know that there will be, that there's headline inflation coming out of the Gulf, and we don't know how much that will be. We're going to need to see. So it makes all the sense in the world that people would look at that and we'd have a vigorous discussion about that. You saw that 3 people dissented over the language. I think all of those people agreed with the rate decision. So the majority of the committee did not want to do that, and I didn't think we needed to do it at this meeting. It really was just a question of why do we need to do that now? You know, we have so much to learn. There's so much uncertainty about the path ahead. There doesn't need to be any rush to make that decision now, because you know what happens in the next 30, 60 days, even by the next meeting, could really change the picture around that language. So you know, it's a much closer thing on the committee than it was in March, and you know that makes all the sense in the world, it seems to me.
Claire.
So Claire Jones, Financial Times. Just going back to this issue of the easing bias. We've now got oil approaching $120 a barrel when it comes to the benchmark. Brent crude. If it stays around those levels 6 weeks from now, what would be your best guess as to whether the easing bias will still be in the statement? Thank you.
I wouldn't want to guess. You know, well, first of all, we're going to have new leadership in all likelihood by then, and new leadership's going to have a very important role to play in that. So I won't be standing here at this podium to answer your question. So I don't know. As I mentioned, that's all I can really say is that we had a great discussion about that today. It's gotten to be a better question in the interim period. We had the discussion. The majority are still on the page of not feeling the need to move to that level, and that's where I am. I get it though. You know, at a certain point you would move, and that conceivably could come as soon as the next meeting.
Thank you. Just to follow on, the new leadership also seemed rather lukewarm on press conferences and on the dot plots. What would your advice to him be on these communication tools?
So I'm not going to give him any advice through you today here, but I think communications generally is. I think every incoming chair takes a look at communications, and it's a very healthy thing. I mean, communications it's very complex, and you know, you can always be looking at new things, and if that happens, it feels like it's going to happen. That's a completely appropriate thing.
Hi, Chair Powell, Neil with Axios. Can you tell us if you've been in touch with incoming Chairman Warsh? To what extent is this a normal transition process versus all the things swirling around, something unusual, and what can we expect when he takes that podium in a few weeks?
I haven't seen him since seeing him at a dinner in January where I congratulated him and had a nice chat with him.
1.16,
You know, the last
4.
process was with Janet Yellen, with whom I had worked for 6 years. And
4.35.
So you know, we were sitting down the hall from each other, so it was a very different thing. I think this is and will be a very normal, standard kind of a transition process. So that's what I expect. I have every reason to think it will be.
Quick follow-up: is the Supreme Court ruling on Governor Cook a factor in when you may leave as a governor?
I wasn't thinking of it as such, but no, not really. I mean, I'm thinking more of the other things I mentioned.
Okay.